Well, I'm actually with my favorite hairdresser today, and she's a very deep little cookie. So I thought I'd have the conversation I'd have with her, with everybody right now, because I think it might help a little. I had a very deep dialogue this morning with some other friends about some of the things that God hates, which three of those things are schisms, divisions, and evil imaginations. And I've watched a lot of women not deal with those things very well, to the downfall of their children, their relationships, their grandchildren, even now some their great grandchildren. So I think it's a really important issue. How do we deal with those divisions, schisms, evil imaginations? I did a video last night about even my son-in-law. His mother ended up killing her lover and then killing herself. I actually understand how that happens. Not only was my first father, my natural father, totally overcome by the issues of life that come from the heart, because he only went to school of theology and psychology, and even though he was a priest and spoke a lot of different languages, he still didn't know how to deal with the issues of life that come from the heart. And that's what Jesus talked about. You know, out of a man's mouth, he defiles himself. And especially in relationships with men. I actually even started crying talking about my mother's second husband, who she forced to adopt me. I didn't know that until recently. But he was a treacherous man. And when he had my sister and I come to his house, he cried for probably 30 minutes, almost uncontrollably, begging for our forgiveness for being so treacherous, and realizing that he never had, even though he was a huge elder in a great big church, he didn't know how to deal with the issues of life that come from the heart, the divisions, the schisms, the evil imaginations. So he's a chain-smoking Camel cigarette, he never overcame anything either. And that's what's so powerful about my son-in-law's testimony. He started understanding the demonic principalities, powers, and rulers that had taken him down, his mom down, his dad down, and he had a lot to say about that. Anyway, my mother's third husband was the most treacherous, hateful of them all. And even at the end of that relationship, and my mom never dealt with anything either. So here we're talking about people that don't deal with the schisms, the divisions, the evil imaginations. You know what they can't teach your children how to do? Is be their brother's keeper. What does God care about the most? Being our brother's keeper. That's why the scripture says the royal law is fulfilled in one thing: thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. That's a huge deal, because we'll play out our life on the stage of Cain and Abel based on how much personal integrity before a holy God we actually want to have. So that's kind of where this conversation led this morning, because I've known somebody who actually knew Gene before me, and she was very treacherous with him. I'm kind of like one of those girls that just shuts up altogether. I didn't deal with anything at all, and I was kind of a shut up girl because I lived in so much fear with men. And she, on the other hand, was very fearful of men, but she walked into a room and basically slapped Gene across the face with her words. I never would have done anything like that because of the terror I lived in. So she acted out her terror, I guess, in a different way. But it's been a long road of loving her and her knowing me. So we've known each other 38 years now. We're going on 38 years. That's a long-term friendship. And we've watched a lot with a lot of people in 38 years too. And one of the things that's in common is the women that have risen up to walk in their own personal integrity, because that became the most important thing to them, was the issues of life that came from their heart, because they really believed that God knows what we're thinking about people, and God knows the meditation of our heart towards his children. And again, what does any mother want? That mother wants her children to be their brother, the sister's keeper, not slayer, right? We want our kids to have answers for each other. But most couples don't have answers for each other, and they hide divisions, schisms, evil imaginations, right? So a lot of tragedies happen just in that all together. So I wanted to talk about true spiritual integrity here because, again, I married somebody who almost provided a kind of terror and hatred that I was familiar with. Here, his parents dealt with no schisms, divisions, evil imaginations. It was all control and walking on each other's eggshells. And this proud wrath that was incurred, that was a very murderous spirit. His father had a way of looking at him or anybody else, that I kill you if you do the wrong thing. And because the mom was emotionally unstable, there was this tremendous treachery of living in a controlled environment with a woman that was unstable. And I'm not excusing the Ted Bundy, the serial murder and rapist either, even as I divulge these things about his past too. And again, all the videos I've been making recently have had to do with the root of bitterness. And in Michael's case, the Ted Bundy of Colorado, he went to a rich kid's school and he was not a rich kid. And he went to go pick up a date one night for the prom, 16 or 17 or whatever. And he had to watch another boy grab his date while the parents sat down with him and said he wasn't the right class for him to date their daughter. And they had just figured that out. So he had a lot of rage and a lot of bitterness. And that's what we've been talking about in the last few videos is we all get to drink a cup of bitterness somehow, some way. The world isn't living for our happiness, nor are they walking in integrity towards God. And so we all pay the price of other people's selfishness and narcissism and self-love, right? All of us are victims in this world that have the potential to live and die bitter. So the issues of life that come from the heart are dealing with that kind of bitterness. Back to the friend this morning, she'd overheard a conversation with another friend, and she started having divisions, schisms, evil imaginations. Now she has a bit of a glitch where she can kind of be a fault finder and bitter and critical. And again, are we in a flesh and blood battle? No, we're not. We're in a prince and power battle, rulers of darkness battle. So even when we get pissed off at friends and people, we're already going down the pointing of the finger road, like Isaiah 58 says, put away the pointing of the finger. Don't keep wrapping bands of guilt around people. Try to loose their bands of wickedness. And how do we do that? With having an understanding, merciful heart. So I was telling this friend, because she was really going deep. She never went deep in 2 marriages. She never went deep with her kids. She never went deep in any friendships. She's actually we've had a deeper and deeper relationship because she's gone after, even more recently, probably the last 13 years, specifically the whole dynamic of our relationship changed because of one reason. I've also been doing a lot of videos on the heroes, the women that rose up to the occasion to be heroes in the Bible. They all had one thing in common. I mean, if you haven't listened to the one I did on the 2 midwives, where is it Caesar, Pilate, I don't know, one of those rulers, the ruler of the day, told him, you women, by the way, you better murder all those little babies that come out of the children that you go to help have birth, those children of Israel. You kill all their sons. And these women were terrorized by a mass murderer, Hitler, back in the day. And you know what they decided to do? They decided to go lay hands on and educate every woman in how to have a baby themselves. So when he called her back, when Pilate called these 2 women back, he said, what is wrong with you? How come you women don't have blood on your hands? And they said, because our women aren't exactly like yours. Our women, they are all midwives. So they have their own babies and they go hide those boys before we have a chance to get there. I mean, talk about the wisdom of God. And what it says about those women is that they feared God. So when you read the Bible about all these hero women that did miraculous things in certain situations, they had one kind of nature in their soul, was they feared God. So here I am, 4 babies into a relationship with the Ted Bundy of Colorado, right? One thing that happened to me, I started getting the fear of the Lord and how I was touching the soul. I didn't use him for my own personal gain anymore because I got saved. I got filled with the Spirit. I started seeing, wow, demons jump in people's skin, right? And what are the things that God hates the most? Pride, lying, living to make people guilty instead of helping them become innocent. So specifically, the conversation this morning was about schisms, divisions, evil imaginations. And those are things that God hates. So I was telling these women that the first 15 years of my marriage with Jean were me learning how to deal with schisms, divisions, and evil imaginations by a man that wasn't taking me personally and helping me deal with the issues of life that come from the heart. Just like Jeremy. How do you deal with a mother that kills herself on Mother's Day and kills her boyfriend too because he won't leave town with her? How does a teenager cope with that crap? Because we get understanding to the spiritual realm. People that are just mad as hell that people aren't making them happy. The cup of bitterness. People get enraged. In a sense, Michael was called a raging control rapist. I don't know, in the world of psychology, and I'm not trying to excuse him either, because a lot of people have problems and don't do what he did. So I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to help you understand that it was at that point, because he was starting to identify some of the issues of life that came from his heart, when I started really going deep with him myself. And more than anything, I was giving him my own testimony about being prideful, about being a liar. Like a couple of the scriptures that came to me, God's not mocked. What a man sows is he's going to reap. I was having a really deep conversation with him about that one day, and hiding and lying, which causes us to keep those little golden eggs of looking down on somebody, right? A power. It's a power of darkness. And that's what all the meetings that Jean's been talking about is getting in touch with the power you're in love with. So I want to just end this soon. I want to talk about one particular thing now. I'm going to hone this down to true spiritual integrity. I have to live with me. Like Esau, what will a man sell the soul of beans for? What started happening with me with Michael is I started coming alive to my own spiritual integrity before a holy God. What is the meditation of my heart going on towards this person right now? What are the words that are going to come out of my mouth? Because people that hide hatred with lying lips will turn into proud wrath smackers. And that's really my mom's third husband. He just slashed people to death with words. It was unbelievable. I'd never seen anybody that could murder people so well with his mouth before I met that man. So I have a lot of understanding to what happens when we let ourselves look down on our brother. And Jeremy was talking about in his testimony too, that when we don't deal with the bitterness, the offenses, the divisions, the schisms, the evil imaginations, even freely, really going deep, giving people my testimony, bearing my soul for the sake of my own personal integrity, because I'm not willing to lie and hide and be a secret slanderer and accuser. That's who Satan was. He was the first one that talked Eve into being bitter, offended, critical against God, finding fault. He created schisms, divisions, evil imaginations. He fortified her world with lies, right? And put her in pride that, hey, I should be boss baby and decide what's right and wrong anymore. Forget God. I'll handle it from here. To the point where the woman couldn't even think about her own husband anymore. So the deterioration of marriages, I've seen hundreds of them, because especially the women, I think all through the Proverbs, the woman is the voice of wisdom. And learning how to give a man wisdom in a good spirit is exactly who Esther was. She got her act together before she went into the presence of the king. Now, a lot of times when I've been thin-skinned with Gene, I've proud-wrathed him and kind of, done the wrong thing. But having somebody in your life that really understands deep spiritual dimensions that play out in people's lives. So I knew a lady too that she was unfaithful with a man. They ended up, I don't know when she started going to church, but there was no faithfulness in their relationship from the very beginning. And so they were always, at some point, especially the husband, fornicating, having affairs, all of that. What we talked about then is how we make people lonely when we're not really willing to go the distance, like my friend was today, which was a miracle for her. She was actually practicing with me what most women don't even practice with their own husband. She was really going deep in her bearing her soul because she was still carrying that fault-finding, critical, schisms, divisions, evil imaginations, hands that live to make people guilty. Those are all the things God hates. So I decided with Michael to stop practicing the things God hates and really go on the distance. And even though he didn't want me to be vulnerable, he didn't want me to be honest, he didn't want me to go the distance with him. You know what I had when I walked away? Because I loved him freely. I started bearing my soul freely, so I didn't live in schisms and divisions and evil imaginations anymore. And you know what I walked away with? Was my own personal integrity. So the bottom line is, what are we willing to sell our own personal integrity before? Because if you have that, you have everything. You have riches, honor, and life. You have wisdom and understanding and knowledge, and dealing with other people in that spirit is actually what you need to have your own personal integrity. And since this is long, I just want to say this. May God's government come in your soul. May you be able to do his will in people's life and not the will of the diabolical one, and practice the things God hates for the sake of his kingdom, power, and glory to be seen in you. Amen.